Hello guys and welcome to a new video of the series of .NET Core. I'm excited to continue with this one because it's been some time since we studied a little bit of Razor pages and what they're about. So we have done a lot of journey now. Basically, we started understanding what .NET Core is, which in essence is a open source cross-platform web application framework, as we saw, with which we can build either dynamically server-side render applications, which means that for every request, the HTML is going to be assembled in the backend, uh, and then it is going to be distributed to the client. So we can build either with that approach with the feature of Razor Pages, and we can also build a server, a REST server most likely, which is going to allow us to also build APIs. So we just build the backend part of our application with a REST API, which follows all the principles and standards of REST that we studied before. And this is how the clients will be operating over resources through our API. We're going to build some APIs later on in the course too. For now, we are focusing a little bit on the Razor Pages approach. Um, we also then understood why a web framework is important. Uh, Basically allowing us developers to not having to build everything from scratch. So there's a lot of things out of the box that we just need to understand how they work and how we can manage them appropriately, and in which scenario we need to maybe include some of the things that they offer us. We maybe understanding which approach we can select from what they offer us. So that's the most important thing, knowing that we have like a box with a lot of tools, which this is the framework, and then we can just select from those tools what do we need. So with this framework, we can get a lot of things out of the box, like networking, login, routing, a feature like Razor Pages, and a lot of features that we need to understand that they exist, and then we can adapt them or use them in our applications. So we studied that. That's also really important. We saw that the Kestrel was what allowed us to publish .NET Core applications in a cross-platform way, because before there was that tightly coupling with IIS, but with the Kestrel being a self-hosted web server, then we can use it to listen to our HTTP requests and transform them into something that our application understands. That in this case, it's the HTTP context object, in which we can obtain information about the request and also start writing the response in that same object, which is really nice. And then this Kestrel is going to pass down the request to the middleware that we also studied, which is a place in which we include all our cross-cutting concerns, which are or which is logic that needs to be executed for every request. So for example, routing, every request needs to go through the routing middleware, authentication in case we are securing our endpoints or our pages, maybe login. So this is a place in which we include all those kind of concerns that uh, may be important for every request to go through, right? So every middleware is going to be able to modify the request and pass it down, generate a response, or start writing the response and then pass it to the next middleware or to the web server. So we started what middleware were, also some important middleware like exceptions and status codes, which is also really important, and how they worked. And after that, we moved to the program.cs file, which is where we have most of the configuration of our application, where we have the builder in which the framework abstracts a lot of the main configuration that we will need to do. So it reduces a lot the boilerplate of what we need to configure in order to have a web application or web API working. So it's going to configure the Kestrel for us. It is going to configure being able to read from configuration files, routing, middleware, and a lot of things that we require for a web application to work. All of that is abstracted right away just by calling the create builder method that we studied. And then in this builder, we can configure our own services, the things that we need for this application particularly. For example, specifying that we need a Razor Pages application, or specifying that we need a web API with no views. Or for example, if we're going to be using a ORM like Entity Framework or Dapper to interact with our databases, then we include that in there. So in this place, we include all that extra things that our particular application is going to need. So our application can be configured accordingly. And then when we build that builder, we have the current instance of our application. So we can then add the middleware in that instance, because maybe some middleware can depend on the services that we registered before. So that's why we first configure all the services and then the middleware, because it might be that that middleware depends on some specific service that we registered before. And then we just simply run our application and it is going to start listening for requests and act accordingly. So that's a really important file that we need to understand what is going on. And we studied that really deeply in our lecture about these files. Finally, we started looking at Razor Pages, which allow us to create these server-side render applications in which we're going to be building a MVC application, because we studied that a Razor Pages is built upon the MVC design pattern. So we're going to have a view which has the extension of CS HTML. In there, we're going to be including a templating syntax. So we're going to have HTML combined with C# code that is going to be assembled in the backend when a request is made to our application. We also have the code behind /page model /controller. It can be called a lot of things, but basically is where we include the complex logic, and it is going to serve as the controller in the design pattern. So it is going to receive the request, validate it, and also making sure which specific action or handler we're going to call. And then we have the model, which is the business logic, the database interaction that we include in our application. So the flow is that the application is going to receive a request, the controller is going to receive it, validate it, call the model in order to execute some business logic, some services, or some database interaction. The model is going to return back to the controller with some information, and then the controller is going to select which kind of response we're going to use. It can be rendering the corresponding page, it can be just a status code, it can be plain text, it can be a lot of things, but we have the ability to choose what we're going to respond back. So that's really nice. And we started understanding how Razor Pages work, because it is opinionated and the routes are based on the folder structure as we saw. We also studied how or what do we need to configure in our program in order to make these Razor Pages work, and a little bit of how the MVC design pattern looks like. And now in this specific lecture, I want to emphasize a little bit on routing. So that's what we're going to be studying in this video. I hope you like it. So let's start. Perfect. So now we're going to be creating a new project for this lecture, which we're going to be seeing routing. So we can do like routing lecture, in which we're going to be using .NET 8.0 and also Razor Pages. So it is going to be creating a nice template for us that we can use. It is going to be configuring using Razor Pages, creating our builder for a web application, doing some um, preparation for handling exceptions, and also a little bit of the middleware that we're going to be needing. And also it is going to create some of the pages that are going to be used in our application. So in this lecture, we're going to be studying, as I explained before, routing. And the first step that we need to understand is what is going on, right? Because in simple terms, we can say, all right, I understand that, for example, the pages that are going to be serving as uh, Razor pages are going to be the ones that do not start with an underscore. So in this case, for now, just omit the shared folder and also these other two. We're going to come back to them later on. But the pages that are going to be registered in our application are the ones that do not start with the underscore. So it's going to be the error, the index, and the privacy pages. All right. So in good terms, we can just say like, I understand that within the pages folder, that the ones that do not have a underscore are going to be the routes that I can target. And that's completely true. If I quickly run the application and, for example, say in here, privacy, it is going to load the privacy. Or if I say error, it is going to show me the error page. So that makes total sense. And if I go to the root, it is going to render the index file, right? Because that's what we understood in the lessons about Razor pages. But how does this even work? What's the understanding behind of targeting a specific Razor page? That's what maybe some people do not know. And this is what maybe having this kind of knowledge is what's going to differentiate from someone who just knows um, that it works and not how it works. So I want to teach you how this is implemented behind the scenes, which I think is really nice. And the one important thing to note is that there's one middleware that is really, really important to that plays a role in routing, which is MapRazor Pages. So MapRazor Pages is going to do something really important just once when our application is starting and the middleware is being executed for the first time. It is going to create like a dictionary. So to say, for example, a table. It is going to look into the pages folder and it is going to say like, let's see, the first time that it is going to run, it is going to go into the pages folder and it is going to look into which routes my application is handling, and then it is going to include them in a dictionary or in a table. So it is going to say if the user goes to the root of the application, then I'm going to be targeting this specific Razor page. If the user goes to privacy, it should be privacy.cshtml. And finally, if it is error, it should go to error.cshtml. So far, so good, pretty simple. Let's also include one of our own. Let's say that we want to include a folder called books, and in here we have a new Razor page called index.cshtml, because that's the that's the convention. So I'm going to say books page or books index page. All right. So it is going to note down that there's also a folder called books. So it is going to go in here, and it is going to say you also have a route that is going to handle books, and it should go and trigger this specific page, which is inside of books and index.cshtml. So far, so good. All right. So let's rerun our application. It is going to boot. And in case I go to books, it is also a page that for now is being handled. All right. And how does this even work? So there's the combination of two specific middlewares that we also studied before, but now it is going to make more sense. If you remember from our lecture about Razor Pages, we studied a little bit about the routing, how it worked. And now that we understand that the first time that our application is run, the map Razor Pages middleware is going to create a dictionary or a table that is going to map the route with the corresponding Razor page that should be targeted. All right. So it is going to be created just one time, and then it is going to be used for every request that enters into our application. So what is going to happen? First, there's going to be a request that enters into our application. We have a routing middleware that we studied before. The routing middleware is going to take the fragment of the URL that is going to be used to match the corresponding Razor page, and it is going to look inside the dictionary or the table to see if there is some Razor page that should be loaded with this specific request that is entering into our application. In case it is going to write it down into the HTTP context object that we started before, that is used for gathering information about the request and also the response. So it is going to write it down in there. And when it hits the endpoint middleware, the endpoint middleware is going to look and say, is there any Razor page that was targeted and is valid? So for example, if the user entered privacy, it is going to say, yeah, privacy is one of the routes that we manage. You should load this specific Razor page. So the endpoint middleware is going to say, oh, the user wants to load privacy, let's do it. And it is going to load the specific code for the request that is being made. In the scenario that we do not have a route for what the user wanted, then the routing middleware is not going to note everything in the object. When it hits the endpoint middleware, there's nothing in the object, so it is going to say, I'm not going to be executing anything, I'm going to pass down the middleware, and it is going to hit the dummy 404 middleware that it's automatically added by the framework, which is basically going to return a not found response back to the web server. So in this new version, there's, as you can see, there's not a use endpoints middleware, but it is inside of this one. So this one is going to play two roles. First, when the application boots, it is going to create a dictionary for us, and then for the subsequent requests, it is going to serve as the endpoint middleware. So the routing is going to write down which specific page should be loaded, and then the map Razor pages is going to say, okay, then I need to execute a specific Razor page. So with the, let's see, with the example that we said before, if we go to privacy, what is happening is that it is going through our middleware. When it reaches this middleware, it is going to say, yep, you have one Razor page that handles privacy routing. So you should load this one for us, please. All right. And then the MapRacer pages, when it hits this specific middleware, is going to say that in the HTTP context object, the use routing said that you should execute this specific Razor page, and then it is going to execute it. And that's how it really works behind the scenes, and the magic of routing works. And so, for example, as I explained before, if we go to books, not found, for example, this one is a route that we do not handle. So we're going to receive a really ugly 404 request because right now we're not handling this kind of errors. So as you can see, this one went through the use routing middleware. It couldn't identify any routing in the dictionary that we saw before. And then the MapRacer pages, once the request reached this one, saw that there were no Razor pages that needed to be executed, and then simply went through, and the dummy 404 middleware was executed. All right, perfect. So now we have built upon this concept of routing and having understood these different things, then we can continue really understanding how the Razor page is executed. When we are saying that the Razor page is executed, it is not essentially that. Behind the scenes, what is actually happening is that an instance of the page model is created. So for example, if we go to /books, our application knows that the corresponding Razor page is going to be this one, as we started before. But when we say that the Razor page is going to be executed, what is actually happening is that an instance of the corresponding page model is created, and then one of these handlers is executed. In this specific scenario, we just have one handler, that is this one on get. So when a handler returns void, it is basically saying that we should render the corresponding Razor page that is associated with this page model. So as we just have one for the get um, request, then we are always just rendering the associated view, which is this one. And that is what's happening behind the scenes. But now we're going to be exploring maybe what happens when we have multiple handlers, and how is the URL composed in this kind of routing process. All right. So we're going to be continuing working with the books route that we created before. So just to have a little bit of a spacing here, for now I'm going just to stop the application. Our different Razor pages are going to be composed, or might be also known as route templates. What does this mean? The route templates are going to be composed of two important concepts. One is going to be the literal value, and the other one is going to be route parameters. So the literal value is the portion of our template that is fixed. What does this mean? So for example, as we can see here, the route template for books is defined on the structure that we specify in our folder, right? So to target the books, we know that we should go into /books, and this part is the literal part because we are specifying by the structure of our project that in order to target the books, I have to mandatory include this part in the URL. But when we want to include parameters in our route template, we can do it as follows. After the page directive that you can see in the top of the Razor page, we can include something like this, for example, theme. And what is happening because of this is that now our page has got two parts. Our template is composed of books and also a route parameter that is going to be called theme. All right. So in this specific scenario, now in case I want to search just for the route of /books, then it is not going to work because I am telling my application that I am expecting it to have a route parameter which is going to be targeting a theme in my app. So if we run our application once again, just to show you that page directive expects a string. Oh yeah, we need to enclose this into a string. Nice. And now we can execute it. And now if I go to /books, as you can see, it is going to throw an error because I'm no longer handling that specific route in my app. I am saying that I am going to expect something of this type, something with the literal value of books and a route parameter of theme. So if I do books slash fantasy, for example, then you can see that now my app is going to be handling this successfully as it did before, right? Which makes total sense because that's what I am telling my application that that's what it should do. You might also tell me, for example, what happens if I want to have the following scenario where I want to handle not only the route that has the literal value of books, but also a route parameter of theme, and also the route that does not provide a route parameter at all. And I want to execute some specific logic in both scenarios. In these kind of cases, then we can include these route parameters as optional. How does it work? I have prepared a little bit of coding here. For now, just omit this part. And what I am saying is that this theme is going to be optional with this question mark. So I'm saying that this is a route parameter that might come or also might just not be present for my routing system to take into account when trying to map a URL to a route template. So it is saying, all right, so as it is optional, I can have these two scenarios, one where it doesn't come at all, and then one where it is going to be provided by the user. So now in my code, I can do some logic for handling this. So we're just going to imagine that in our database, we're going to have a list of books. And for now, we're just going to have a couple of them. One for, I'm sorry, here. One for Harry Potter and one for ASP.NET Core in Action. One is going to be fantasy and one is going to be programming, all right? So I'm going to execute some logic to, for example, say that, all right, on get handler, that is the one that I have just right now, I'm going to receive a route parameter that we can define as a parameter in the handler. And we're going to say that this is an optional parameter. It might be null or it might also hold a value. So then when I want my Razor page to access some properties from my page model, I have to say that I want this to be a bind property with this decorator. So it is going to know that in my Razor page, I'm going to be able to target that specific property that is in there. So when I want to make something visible between the two of them, then I need to target it with, for example, the bind property. This is just an overview because we're going to be exploring more about model binding in the next lecture, but I just want to give a heads up of how does it work and why I'm including this part in here. So I have my list of books in my database, for example, and then when my application gets on my onGet handler, it is going to identify if a route parameter for theme was provided or not. And then I'm going to do some simple logic that I'm going to check if the theme is null or empty, which means that it was not provided by the user. Then I'm going to return all of my books. Otherwise, in case it holds a value, I'm going to filter those and just extract the ones where the theme of the book uh, is the same as the theme that was provided by the user. All right, so now in my Razor page, I'm going to be able to execute C# code as we saw before, because this is a templated syntax allowing us developers to combine the two of them, HTML and C#, that is going to be assembled in the backend once the request comes into our application. So what I'm saying is that I'm going to loop over the books that is exposed in here. Thanks for the bind property decorator, and is set on my handler. So once it is set, then I'm going to iterate over it and basically say that I want to see what the properties of title and theme are for those specific objects. All right, so for example, I just already went through it, but let's go to the root. If we go to /books, it is going to say that there's nothing for my theme in this specific scenario. So it is going to give me all of my books, all right? But if I go to /fantasy, then it is going to know that I provided a value for the route parameter of theme, and then it is going to extract that value and use it in our application. So as you can see now, in this case, I was just returned with the object that hold the fantasy in the theme. So whenever we have this kind of a structure where we're going to be expecting a route parameter, then it is going to search for the URL. It is going to see if a value was provided for this parameter in particular. In case it was, then it is going to be extracted, and this one is going to be called a route value now that we can use in our application. So in this case, the route value was mapped to fantasy. And then we can use this route value. So in here, it is basically saying that give me all my books where the theme equals fantasy, because that's what the route parameter is as of now. But what happens if, for example, I include a theme that we are not currently handling, like let's say sci-fi? Then of course there's nothing going to be rendered in my application, because it is going to say the theme is not empty. So I'm going to try to filter them based on the theme that was provided. But in here I have no theme with the sci-fi description, so it is not going to return to me anything. All right. There's one just final thing that I want to mention about these route templates, is that you can override the name of the literal value. That, for example, if you do not want to say books and you want to target a different name, then you can override it completely by starting the page directive with a slash. So now instead of books, it is going to be my books, as I defining here. Right? And then what I also wanted to explain to you is that we are going to have a literal value of my books, also a route parameter with a optional value of theme, and also we can define default values for parameters. In this case, we're going to have a size, which is going to have a default value of 100. So what I'm doing right here is just grabbing the value of that parameter of size and setting it into a property that then we can expose to the page, like this one. So in here we can say the size provided is this one. All right. So for example, if then we go to, now it's going to be my books, then fantasy, it is going to be this one with a size of 100. But then I can also do this. And now the size provided is going to be 250. All right. So we have the possibility to override completely what we want the route to be named. We can also include optional values and act accordingly. And also we can include default values for the parameters. So I think that that's what I wanted to show you about these templates. And now we're going to move into generating URLs. One other thing that I wanted to show you is that we not only have the ability to return a response indicating that we want to render the corresponding page, as we are doing now. For example, if we go to our root Razor page, which is this one, then we're telling basically that we want the page to be rendered. So when it hits our page model, it is going to just execute this handler because this is the only one that we have. And when we return void, it is the same as doing this. The action result, and then return page. All right. So let me show you that this is going to do exactly the same as you see. So we get the same result. So when we return an iAction result, this is basically the, as the name says, the result of an action. And each of these handlers can also be known as an action. So we have a lot of helper methods that are given to us thanks to this page model that we are inheriting from. So we get a lot of methods like, for example, telling that we want to render the corresponding page, but we also can do other kind of things. And one that I want to show you is that we are able to redirect to another page that we have in our application. So instead of returning the page, I want to say that I want to redirect to page. In here, we're going to include the name of our page. It's going to be books and index. And what this is going to do, as you're going to see soon, is that instead of rendering the corresponding HTML for our root template, which is this one, we're telling our application that we want to redirect to another page in our application. So we are saying, I want you to redirect to books and index. So we need to include in here the Razor page that we want to target. All right. And in case our Razor page receives a parameter, then we can also include that. For example, we can say new theme is going to be fantasy. Like that. Now let's see what happens. And as you can see, now we are basically saying that I want to render this specific Razor page, the index that is inside of books, and this is going to receive an optional parameter for the theme. So when we are redirecting, we can also include a object that is going to hold the properties for the parameters that we are expecting in the other side. So we have done huge progress by now. And there's one final thing that I want to share with you before we finish up this routing lesson, because it's getting quite long by now. But I have covered most of these fundamentals so that you have all the tools when you're going to be working with routing in .NET Core applications. So the last thing that I want to share with you is, as we maybe started before, we saw that the endpoint middleware is going to be the one that is in charge of selecting which specific handler is going to be executed. Right now, we just have one. So whenever our application hits our route template of books, the default onGet handler is going to be executed, and then it is going to return void, specifying that the corresponding Razor page, which is this one, is going to be rendered. And in here, we just have a simple div with hello from Razor's book page. So far so good. And also, what I want to see now is that in a single page model, we can have more than just one handler. So let's imagine that we also want to have one called onGet. But if we have two with the same signature, then we're going to be having conflicts. So for example, let's imagine that we want to handle one handler that is going to return to us all the books. And typically in an application, this one is going to be like the root of our controller, so to say. So our controller is going to be books. And if we go just to the root of this, it is going to be returned to us with all the books, right? So it makes sense that this one is going to return, let's say, in here, bind property, and bind property, public string, text is going to be a get and a set. And then on the default onGet, we're going to say that text is going to be list of all my books. All right. And basically the way in which a handler is called is as follows. It is going to be on, which is mandatory. Then we say HTTP verb. And then we have a special handler that we can use. So as you can see in my page, I have defined the parameter of handler. It is going to be optional. This one you need to call it like this, handler. And what is this going to do? We can then in our in the name of our handler methods, we can say this one onGet. I don't want to specify any handler because I just want this to be the root or the index, so to say, of my controller of books. So this one is, whenever it's hit, it is going to return all of my books. But then I can say on get, which is the HTTP verb. And the handler is going to be like a description of the action that this handler is going to be executing. So let's say details, for example. So this one in the text is going to say return details of a single book, right? Return details of a single book. And then in here, I can do add model dot text, like that. So if now we run our application again and we go to books, This one, if you think about it, is going to be the root of the application or the controller. So it is going to return to me the default handler, which is going to be list of all my books. And then if we do a slash the name of my handler, that if you remember we call it details, it is going to say return details of a single book. Great. So as you can see, we can have in just one centralized page model. This page model is going to be in charge of all the logic to handle my books. So we can define in there different handlers that they're going to be differentiated from others based on what HTTP verb we're going to be using. Most likely it's going to be a get. But for example, if we are making a form submission or things like that, it can be a post. And then we can define an optional handler so that in the route template, we can include it. And then it is going to be figured out by the framework that this handler is the one that is being requested. So we can target different logic based on the action that we want to do. So in this one, we're going to go to the database, retrieve all my books, and then return them. And in here, imagine that we go to details. We also ask for an ID, for example. So let's say that in here we're going to have an ID, and then we can go to our database, fetch for this corresponding ID, and then return the information of that book. I don't want to go more into this because we're going to be seeing all of model binding next, because this is part of a query string that we're going to be seeing later on. But what I want you to obtain from this part of the lecture is that in a simple page model, we can have the logic centralized for the resource that we are managing. In this case, we're managing books, and we can define different handlers with this opinionated structure in which we include the on, then we include the HTTP verb, and then a handler if we want to let the endpoint middleware know that we want to target specific actions, and we use this handler to help him know which of the different handlers we're going to have. Because let's say that, for example, later on we say on get, let's say horror, for example. So it is going to say text return all books with theme of horror, right? So now if we rerun our application, if we go to books/horror, then we're going to be returned with this. So as you can see, now we're handling 3 different route templates. One for the default, which is the root, then one that is going to be having the details as the handler, and then one that is going to be having the horror as a handling, meaning that we're going to be searching for just the books that have horror for the theme, right? So we can define all the handlers that we like based on our requirements, and this is really nice because we don't have to be building different pages all over the place just to handle different actions. We can have it all centralized really nicely in one place and then differentiate them based on the action that the user wants to do. So I think that this is going to be what I wanted to finish with. I think that we have been studying a lot of important concepts. This one is going to be like, or this one was the most practical one by now. I really encourage you to start a Razor Pages application, try to configure it from scratch, understand what the program CS file, what do you need to configure the services to make it work, define your own routes, your own folders, play with them a little bit, define your own route templates with literal values and route parameters, and just play around, get the feeling of what an application like this looks like. And when you feel comfortable, then join me on the next lecture that we're going to be studying more about model binding and how we do uh, maybe pass data that comes from the request to our handlers so that they can use it in there. For example, we use an ID that the request contains so that we can grab it into our handler and look into the database for fetching that specific book with that ID, things like that. Or for example, information from a form so that we can create a new book in our application, things like that, which are really common in a real world application. So we are building up this concept of how this works, really understanding what's happening behind the scenes. That I think it's really important rather than just knowing that it works like this because it does. So I think that this is really important, and just have a play around with the framework. And when you feel comfortable, join me on the next one. So thank you and have a great day. Bye bye.